Matthew Coller, 1500 ESPN, Minnesota. We were talking about a team getting ready to go to the Super Bowl. One of them ended up winning the Super Bowl, Matthew, but now we have a very important Week 5 game. What has gone on in Minnesota where the Vikings, I don't know if they're in desperation or must-win mode just yet, but what's happening out there with the Vikes?
Yeah, I definitely feel like it is desperation must-win mode because even though the schedule gets a little bit easier after this, not by a whole lot. I mean, they have to face Tom Brady, who looks like he could still football pretty well, and Drew Brees and Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers again the rest of the way. So if they're going to get this season back on track, they really need to beat the Philadelphia Eagles, especially to kind of wash some of the bad taste out of their mouths of the last 2 weeks, the historically bad loss against the Buffalo Bills, and then just getting smoked by the Los Angeles Rams offense that, ran the Vikings defense up and down the field. So I think in order to not only get their season back on track and stay competitive toward the playoffs, there's also the confidence factor that I think right now it's got to be pretty low after these last 2 weeks.
How's this game being viewed out there from fans, from media? I mean, obviously, there was the game last year where there was a whole heck of a lot of post-game hubbub about the way that the atmosphere was out there. So how are people viewing this game?
Well, I don't think that if they're traveling to Philadelphia, they're going to wear purple this time. There is that. I think that they're very much looking at it as they're ready to call this season a massive disappointment if they don't win this game, and they take only one out of their first 5 games. And I think that some eyes might be directed at Mike Zimmer if they don't win this game, and they might start to wonder why it would be 3 times of going to Philadelphia and getting beat 3 times there. And the sort of reverberation of last year in the NFC Championship game is still being felt, I think in part because other teams are still using a lot of the same things the Eagles did to beat this Vikings defense. And so there is the question that's up in the air, have people figured out the Vikings defense? I mean, have they figured out Mike Zimmer a little bit? And I would say to Zimmer's credit that Everson Griffin not playing is a humongous deal. And also Terrence Newman retiring last minute so they couldn't, find another veteran cornerback or something like that. That hurt them as well. But, they still got so much talent on this defense that they should be a heck of a lot better than giving up 465 yards and 5 touchdowns to Jared Goff last week. So, I think that right now, every Vikings fan is like, let's wait and see what happens here in Philly. But if they come away with another bad loss, then I think that we start to talk about pressure on quite a few people.
Matt, how is everyone up there looking at this game? Like, are they looking at this as a tall task going into Philadelphia where they had a rough go of things in the NFC title game against the Super Bowl defending champions? Or are they looking at it like, hey, this isn't the same team as last year. They have some people banged up, just coming back off injury, and they had a couple bad losses.
Yeah, no, I think that's more the latter there is more how people are looking at it, although you could say all of those same things for the Vikings. I mean, last year when we went into the NFC Championship game, I remember saying and writing just like, this is a matchup of titans. This should be a great game, and it wasn't. So, but I think that these two teams are on the same plane right now as far as they haven't gotten this exact start that they want. But their seasons are very far from over. A win here could be a tide-turning, sort of win that, kind of sends you off and running on the season and gets you back together. And we know how difficult it is, too, for teams to go to the Super Bowl and then, come back and have another great season because of just how many football games you end up playing and all the emotions that go into a Super Bowl. So I think that the Vikings should be looking at this game like they're playing an opponent that isn't exactly the same as the team that beat them. Even, it's a different quarterback, and Carson Wentz coming back from his injury hasn't quite been the same Carson Wentz as he was before. So it's not an opponent that you look at as maybe as strong as the Rams. That felt like it was a very serious uphill battle even going into that game. But still, it's the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's a head coach in Doug Peterson on the other side who completely schooled the Vikings last year. And, it's almost like they've never fully recovered from that beatdown.
You mentioned a different quarterback with the Eagles. Now Carson Wentz is healthy. No Nick Foles in this game. But on the Vikings side of things, different quarterback as well. Case Keenum's now in Denver making mistakes. You guys have Kirk Cousins. How much of a different dynamic does that give the Vikings, despite their record? How much different is this team now? What should the Eagles expect?
Well, for one, I would say that some of the Case Keenum mistakes you allude to are the reason they decided to sign Kirk Cousins because they figured some of those dropped interceptions from last year would get caught this year, and it looks like they are. With Kirk Cousins, it's been really interesting, his start to the season, because he has phenomenal numbers, and at times he has made throws that there is no way in Case Keenum's life he is ever making. And he has proven to that end exactly why they decided to move on. But there have been other times, long stretches where the offense cannot get going, and there have been turnovers with Kirk Cousins too that have frustrated this team and cost them seriously. I mean, against Buffalo, in an eye blink, they're down 17-0 because Kirk Cousins fumbles twice. And then on Thursday night, he fumbles with a chance to go down and tie the game on the final drive. And he is number one in the NFL in fumbles over the last 4 years. I mean, since 2015. And even if I recall, when he was in Washington last year, I think he had a fumble that turned into a touchdown for the Eagles. So, I mean, you've seen it there playing him that he is susceptible to that edge pressure and has shown up quite a bit. So while there has been some really great moments and he is getting the most out of Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, they have been unstoppable. There have also been too many times where, you know, in Green Bay, it takes 3 quarters for their offense to start getting going. And against the Rams, they fall behind before they really start to find their stride. So that cannot happen against the Eagles because their defense is just too good.
All right. We know that one area, I mean, they got great weapons. Thielen, Diggs, you got the quarterback that has had success against the Eagles. Cook is back, although he seems like he's had some a little banged up. But that offensive line, right, still a problem?
Yeah, that would be putting it lightly. Last week, Aaron Donald alone had 13 quarterback pressures, and if you have 5 in a game, you probably dominated. And so that tells the story pretty well. And I would say that the two are comparable in terms of just pure talent level, except the Eagles have the better guys rushing off the edge, which is where Kirk Cousins has really struggled. And even the Buffalo Bills, who have a couple of decent edge rushers, were really able to take advantage of the Vikings' tackles. And I mean, it's really a weak offensive line aside from center Pat Elflein. Even Riley Reif, who played pretty well last Thursday, he's been banged up too. He's been dealing with a foot injury, and he really got lit up against the Bills off the edge by Jerry Hughes. And not only that, have they had trouble protecting Kirk Cousins. Almost every other drop back, he's under pressure, but they also can't run the ball at all. I mean, and they're going up against a top run-stopping defense, and you really wonder how will they find ways to run the ball even a little, even to just make the Eagles think about their play-action game. Because I was watching the Tennessee game back, and it was just play action after play action after play action, and Mariota was able to have some success with it. Well, I mean, how are the Eagles supposed to respect play action from the Vikings if they can't run the ball at all? And Dalvin Cook hasn't been 100% really since week 1, and that's definitely a problem for them if he isn't, because when he was in there, he was having to break tackles to get any sort of yardage. So the offensive line going into the season, we thought it would be the biggest problem, and it has been.
We're talking with Matt Coller, 1500 ESPN in Minnesota, here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. You know, the Eagles, if you watched the Tennessee game last week, you saw they've had some issues in the secondary, specifically with the McLeod spot last week, and Mills has, given up some big plays this year. So do the Vikings look at that area and say, we've got something here?
I would say so, absolutely, that it's a massive mismatch when you're talking about Adam Thielen or Stephon Diggs going up against Mills. I mean, that's like the one you would circle to start attacking. However, Kirk Cousins has to be able to drop 7 steps and set his feet and throw in order to get the ball to those guys. And last week, I will say to Kirk's credit, he had the fumble at the end, but he made a number of spectacular throws with guys right in his lap. And he's shown all the arm talent that they ever could have asked for. But that, you go into every single game, the Vikings looking at Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen as the two guys that they're going to rely upon the most. And so what I wouldn't be surprised by, and what the Eagles did a lot against Marcus Mariota was they rushed him. They did cover 0 and sent a bunch of people and tried to throw him off his game. And for stretches in that game, it worked really well. And I think they're going to be very aggressive with Cousins too, because the thing with Cousins, and again, he is a really good quarterback from what I've seen through training camp in these few weeks. So it's nitpicking to an extent, but you're not talking about Aaron Rodgers here, who has brilliant pocket presence and can slide to the empty spaces in the pocket and create more space for himself and time. Kirk Cousins isn't really like that. And so if they can find ways to pressure him, it won't matter how open Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs are. But if you're looking at a big mismatch for the Vikings, I think that's where it is.
Where do you think that the Vikings feel that they have an advantage or a mismatch on their defensive side of things going up against the Eagles offense? Is there an area where they're saying, all right, this is the blueprint for us this week in Philadelphia against Carson Wentz in this offense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think where they really hope that they can figure something out is that Wentz isn't quite up to speed fully yet. And when he gets to move, he can really make plays. And even last year, when you go back and look at that NFC Championship game, as much as it did totally get away from the Vikings, there was a lot of pressure on Nick Foles at times when they blitzed. He just made great plays. And then the offensive line, as the game went on, started to dominate. And, of course, you know what happened after that. But, it might be the time where we see Mike Zimmer turn up the blitzing a lot more than he has so far. But I think as far as it's not a mismatch, but it's the thing we'll be watching the most is just Mike Zimmer. Because this is a guy who has made his bones for his entire life as a defensive head coach. And throughout the time that I've been covering him here in Minnesota, he's had to make a lot of different tweaks and changes and things like that and built up the defense to be this talented. But, I mean, he's got to be shaken by what happened last year and what happened in Los Angeles. He said the defense had never played any worse against the pass than he's seen in Los Angeles. So it's really going to be that the matchup of the coaches that I'm looking at is schematically, because the Vikings have an incredible talent. I mean, they've got talent up front. Harrison Smith might be the best safety in the game. I mean, even though Trey Waynes is out, Xavier Rhodes is an elite shutdown corner. But so far, none of those pieces have really been as good as they have been in the past.
Real quick on that, I was listening. We have a show that comes on 6 to 8 with our Eagles guys, and they were having this conversation about whether or not in this new day and age, these new players, is Zimmer kind of an old school guy that's message is falling on deaf ears, because they got a lot of talent on that defensive side of the ball to be playing the way that they are.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I don't think that's true. I mean, I think that his age would make you think that, but from being around him on a daily basis, I have never felt like he's a guy that won't make changes or won't adjust or only believes in his system, because I've seen him make so many adjustments along the way. I think what the issue is, it kind of goes twofold, is that opponents know that they're going to keep their two linebackers in every situation, and they've found ways to attack Anthony Barr in coverage. I think that's a big deal for them. But even more so than that, Everson Griffin being out is just massive. I mean, I look at him as one of the 5 best defensive ends, all-around defensive ends, and a heart-and-soul type of guy. And when he's not in there, the 2 games he hasn't been in there, the defense hasn't been the same at all. And Zimmer's defense is predicated on being able to pressure the opposing quarterback. When you look at the 70-yard touchdown by Cooper Kupp last Thursday, I mean, one of the reasons that happens is that Cooper Kupp runs all the way across the field. He's got the time to do that. Everson Griffin rarely gave quarterbacks the time to do that. And, they've also got some young players who are being forced into action, and Mike Zimmer's defense is very complicated. So it's kind of been a perfect storm for things to go wrong. I do expect him to make changes, but I think that's what it will ultimately come down to, is what changes he makes and if he can solve some of Doug Peterson's offense.
All right, should be fun. Both teams, NFC Championship game just a couple of months ago. Now maybe playing for, I don't want to say their seasons, but really shaping their seasons on Sunday at Lincoln Financial Field. Matt Coller, 1500 ESPN, Minnesota. They'll be in town this week to take on the Eagles. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Like all guests appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.